Welcome to Angel to Exit the Sieve with your host, Fred Cohen. The sieve is typically used to describe the sales process, and you can see a sieve over on the right to get a sense of how this works. The sieve starts by getting leads. The questions that a typical investor are going to want to know is how many leads are there? How many can you generate through what process? What's the cost per lead? They're going to want to know what you do once you get a lead. So as an example for this particular slide and throughout the rest of this slide set, I'm going to be using selling ice cream to Eskimos. So, there's an old joke that, boy, that guy could sell ice cream to Eskimos. So it turns out any reasonably good salesperson can sell ice cream to Eskimos. And as an example, of course, Eskimos probably like ice cream just plenty. But the idea was because it's cold, you can't sell them. But of course you can. The question is, what does it take to do that? So an example is we're going to generate leads by U.S. Postal Service addresses of Alaskans, which we're going to purchase. There's something like 100,000 addresses we're going to purchase. It's going to cost $1,000, and we're going to download it from the internet, and we're going to send out mailers to start the process. So that's our lead generation. That's how we find, buy, generate, and get leads. The next step is qualifying the leads and turning them into prospects. So generally, we're going to want to know, how do you qualify the leads? Do you have multiple types of customers? And if so, how do you differentiate them? What makes a lead qualified? So example, do you like ice cream? Are you lactose intolerant? You might have ice cream for people that are lactose intolerant. It's not made of cream, it's made of something else. You also might want to individualize, stores versus people that aren't stores. You might want to sell to stores so that they can retail it to the people that live there instead of selling direct to individuals. And so you might differentiate by asking if you can get it locally, or do you have it in stock? And then you want to know how many customers, how many items are you going to likely want? Is cold storage an issue, and so forth? Do you have cold storage? So those are the typical things you might want to do to qualify a lead to make sure that they'll fit into your model and not be too expensive or difficult to operate with. Next, of course, you have to somehow pitch to those prospects to turn the prospects into, I'll call them negotiators. There's not always a defined process, but very often the prospect turns into a negotiation and they become a negotiator through the process of the pitch. So you want to know, what are the various pitches? How are they delivered? How are they adapted with time? For example, here's a pitch. Everyone likes ice cream, right? Everybody's got to love ice cream. We have a new type of ice cream specifically tuned to the Alaskan taste. Okay, whatever your pitch is. You might do direct mail to customers. You might have telephone calls to set appointments with stores, retail stores, and have somebody come and visit each store. So you go from town to town in Alaska visiting the store with your truck that includes the samples of the ice cream and everything else you need. And you might also have a different pitch that's adapted to different types of stores. Retail might go through a wholesaler, food stores versus convenience stores, and so forth. So you have a differentiated market with differentiated pitches. Next, of course, you overcome objections. So you have to understand what the objections are. Typically, they're to the product, the company, or the salesperson. And how do you overcome them? For example, it's too cold up here for ice cream. And then maybe the way you overcome that is by explaining that 35% of all ice cream sales are in winter. Now, just to be clear, I don't know that any of these things are facts. I'm making it all up. But if you're going to be explaining this to other people and successful in business, you're going to get real facts. Nobody will buy it. Well, but Eskimos love ice cream. It's too risky for my business. We will front you the product. There's no risk on your part. We'll provide you with the product and the means to sell it, and you just have to let us know when you want more. You're not the best ice cream brand out there. That's true. We're not Breyers. We have a special taste in our ice cream that's particularly suited to Eskimos. Have a taste of our ice cream. And you hand them a taste. And then finally, the negotiator, on some percentage of the time, you'll close it and they'll become your customers. So how is it you finally close it? Well, maybe you fill out a web order form, or you leave the ice cream on site with a freezer and signage. Maybe you hold an ice cream party. So everybody in the town comes by for an ice cream party at your expense. And then, of course, you arrange for them to be able to pay in reorders. There's ice cream in the store, everybody knows it, and they're off, they've launched. Of course, you ultimately then have to fulfill, service, retain, and grow those customers in that customer base. Finally, we're certainly going to want to know the results under different assumptions. So, for example, this is the process associated with its cost. So you might buy 1,000 leads for $1,000. It's $1 a lead, and suppose that includes the qualifying cost. So you send them out some sort of a mailer, and they, respond to you. And if they don't respond, you just say they're done. So the ones that responded, the test market that you did of 1,000 leads out of the 100,000 total in the addressable market, 5% responded and said, yeah, sure, I like ice cream and I'm interested. So that's 50 prospects. They cost you $20 per prospect. So now you do test pitches. Suppose it costs $5 to make a pitch. 20% said, all right, let's talk about it. Let's negotiate it. So there are 10 that out of those 50 that were qualified that got into negotiations, which means it's costing you now $200 per negotiator. That's $100 from the $20 per prospect at 5% of the market, but it's also another $5 per pitch. So that's why it's $200 instead of $100 cost per negotiator. And suppose it takes $5 to close. You tested some closes, showed 50% of the ones that were negotiator closed in 30 days. So you had 5 closed, which means that your cost per close is $450. So customers cost $450 each to acquire, and 1 in 200 is closable using the methods you identified. So suppose the total addressable market's 100,000 total Eskimos that are reachable by mail. That means that if you run this thing for the whole market, you're going to get 500 total closable at $450 each. So it's going to cost you, $250,000, a little bit less than, maybe $225,000 to make it to that market and own those 500 customers. So of course, that's the numerical explanation. The question is this a good business decision? And that's what you're going to want to know in order to decide whether to be in the business. And of course, that depends on the rest of the business. That's a heck of a lot of ice cream per Eskimo to break even if you're selling individual ice cream bars. But if the ice creamed Eskimos was a starting point for getting Eskimos who like ice cream to buy a whole bunch of other related products, then maybe it's a sensible process and maybe not. The point is that this is the kind of process, this is the sieve, this is what the sieve looks like, this is the numbers that you put on the sieve, and these are the questions you sort of have to answer in order to make a decision about whether this is a rational business plan. And in pitching this to angels, of course, you're going to have to explain to them something that makes sense. It's going to have to be that in the context of the rest of your business is sensible, and we'll discuss that in the greater context, or we've discussed this before, but we'll discuss it again. I just want to thank you for participating. We're going to now take questions from the live audience and turn off recording.